Okay, just before we get to the South African story, let's tell you what OPEC rolled out in its monthly report today. OPEC says it trimmed its estimates for supplies from outside the group in 2016, expects the plunge in prices to catch its toll on U.S. oil industry. According to the report, OPEC is cutting estimates 2016 for non-OPEC members by 250,000 barrels a day to average 57.14 million barrels a day. That was the report that was released today at the Vienna-based Secretariat of the cartel. According to the report, quote, this downward trend should accelerate in the coming months given various factors, mainly low oil prices and lower drilling activities. The market took the news. Brent crude went up slightly, 0.2%, slumping still below the $40 a barrel in recent days. That's the story from the world of OPEC and the world of oil. We call it crude awakening. So South Africa's President Jacob Zuma dismissed his Finance Minister Nene late Wednesday in a move that is expected to worsen the country's economic woes and which sent the rand plummeting to new lows. The South African rand traded down 5.7% on the US dollar. The currency fell to 15.24 to the greenback shortly after that announcement late yesterday, extending a series of losses for the rand this year. Now let's get across to Jean Tipayi, who is an economist from Johannesburg. Thank you very much via the phone. We appreciate your time this afternoon.
I'm glad to join you, and good afternoon.
Thank you, Payi, from NASA's Advisory Research in Joburg. How did this news hit everyone late last night, and what has been the reaction today since the sacking of the finance chief, Nene?
Look, I mean, everybody is completely shocked. We are still, listening to people, and everybody is really expressing the sense of shock. Even though people were discussing rumors of a reshuffle, which is very different, I think we must notice, from actually a firing or a sacking of one minister. Remember that what has happened now is not to reshuffle the cabinet, where you move one minister to another place and to try and, to strengthen the cabinet. It was just the sacking of one minister. So it's a very difficult thing. It's very shock. And people are still trying to figure out why. So you are finding many business leaders, politicians, social commentators are saying, why did this happen? So, that's the main problem, that we are all shocked.
This sacking of this finance minister comes at a time when things are a little bit topsy-turvy for South Africa. I'm sure you agreed. Africa's most advanced economy, from the power problems to the miners' problem, the decline in commodity prices. What exactly is the discussion about the way forward for the Zuma's administration from an economic point of view?
So, I think if you follow, a lot of the stuff that's been happening, I say rightly, we've got all sorts of troubles, including recently being downgraded by ratings agencies, and now we are nearly junk status. So South Africa's economy has been downgraded to a level where it's nearly junk status in terms of our credit rating. So a lot of the things are negative. We know that many of the mining companies are now discussing, because of the commodity prices, to cut jobs. And so there's a lot of negative information with regards to the economy. So this development is just one of those further negative developments that seem to compound the problems that have been faced by the South African economy and South African business people, consumers, labor. So it does not help at all. It's actually sort of worsening the problem. Especially because, remember, we are also 2 months away from the next annual budget of the Ministry of Finance. And so people are asking the question, will this new minister be up to the task of putting together this budget and then taking it around to investors for investors to fund the budget?
Okay, let's leave it there for today. We'll get into with you in the days ahead. Of course, there's a lot to talk about this developing story. We thank you for your time, appreciating where you are as we speak, to be able to make this telephone conversation to us from Johannesburg on the road. Xanti Payi from Nassen's Investment Advisory and Research in Johannesburg is an economist. Okay, let's talk about Argentina. Central Bank Alejandro Vanoli has resigned, ending uncertainty about the direction the monetary policy will take a day before the country's next president assumes office. Vanoli had been under pressure from President-elect Mauricio Macri to step down. Macri, a proponent of free markets, won the presidency last month and is to be inaugurated today, Thursday, December the 10th. Vanoli sent outgoing President Cristina Fernandez a resignation letter to announce his decision to quit. His resignation paves the way for Macri to dismantle capital controls and unify the exchange rate, a central plank of his campaign promise to liberalize Latin America's third biggest economy. Vanoli has criticized Macri's monetary policy plans, which he says will lead to a sharp devaluation and a spike in inflation. So every November the 9th is set, December the 9th, I beg your pardon, is the day set for the world's Anti-Corruption Day. Yesterday was no exception. So let's focus a little bit on the continent, Africa. Let's bring in Lanre Akinola, who was a former editor at This is Africa. He's also the former associate editor with the Financial Times and worked briefly with Bloomberg LP in London. He's on the Skype to us from London this afternoon. Larry, thank you very much, editor at Africa Business. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Bolson.
Thank you. It's good to see you again. Sitting down yesterday and looking at the issue of corruption around the world, the big question is corruption Africa's biggest problem?
It's undoubtedly a problem, but I would argue that really in the best way to understand corruption in Africa is that it's a symptom of a bigger problem. And that bigger problem really boils down to a very simple point, which is leadership. And in many cases, bad leadership or the wrong leadership. Africa is not the only part of the world that suffers from corruption, but you could argue that it suffers disproportionately. But I would say that when you break it down, it usually comes back to the same issue, which is you have the wrong kind of leadership. And when I say leadership, I'm referring to the policymakers, the people in government, the people on the political side, who really set the scene, create the ecosystem in which people have to live and get by, and that really is the root of a lot of the corruption that you're seeing across the continent.
How much has been achieved in tackling corruption on the continent, and are you encouraged by what has been done so far across the continent, especially in sub-Saharan Africa?
I think it depends on where you look. You know, we speak in general terms about Africa, but you know as well as I do, it's a vast and complex place. It's a continent of 54 countries. So the experiences of countries varies wildly when it comes to the issue of corruption. There are certainly signs of encouragement, but there are also signs of there are also big warning signs and sources of concern. When you look at a country like Tanzania, for example, they have just elected a new president, John Magufuli, and he's already, the actions he's taken since he's come into office, he ran on an anti-corruption platform, has been very strong. You've just been talking about South Africa, and there it have been going in the opposite direction. So I would say you really have to look at it on a regional basis and a country-by-country basis. And they're encouraging stories, but they're also discouraging stories. On the whole, it's a mixed bag for sure.
So if you look in the bag, where do you place Nigeria?
I knew that question was coming. It's a tricky one. Nigeria, of course, has arguably suffered more than most countries from the ill effects of corruption. And I would say that the election of President Buhari earlier this year was an important step in that direction, but it's a huge undertaking. It's a huge task to tackle the issue of corruption in Nigeria because, as you know, one of the hardest things is tackling corruption when it has become institutionalized, when it has become endemic. So I would say that it's a little bit too early to make any definitive statements on where things are going in Nigeria. But I think the fact that we have the president we have now is a very encouraging sign. And I think over the next 12 months, we're probably going to see some fairly serious action on the corruption issue.
So moving forward, how much more do you think should be done? How much should be done? And when should it be done?
It all has to be done, and it all has to be done now. But of course, that's not a realistic scenario. Really, what we need to see is we need to see more examples of people in political leadership roles, and not just at the head of state level, but really across the board when it comes to policy making, getting very serious about this issue. We need to, I think, follow examples of countries like Tanzania, countries like Rwanda, and countries like Botswana, and a few other examples where you're seeing that kind of leadership being demonstrated. But also, I think what we need to see is more concerted action and effort from regional economic bodies, so maybe that ECOWAS in West Africa, or the East African Community, or the Southern African Regional Economic Bloc. But also, we also need to see, I think, a little bit more of a concerted effort from business, because business is becoming an increasingly powerful voice and an increasingly powerful player in shaping the economic prospects of African economies, and they have an important role to play. So we need to keep up the pressure on our political leaders, and hopefully, setting good examples and being able to point to good examples across the continent will increase that pressure on others to start to follow suit.
Lanre Akinola, we thank you for your time today. We appreciate that via Skype from London. Lanre Akinola, editor, African Business, and a fellow of the Archbishop Tutu Leadership Fellowship 2014. Let's come back after the break for the rest of the programming.